talk about action plans. And so today we are going to talk about what is action planning, spend some time talking about why we as campuses and nonprofit partners should develop an action plan, how to develop an action plan, who can help on campus and off campus to develop an action plan, and when you should be developing an action plan. And then we'll have some time for some questions, and we'll do our best to provide some answers. So what is an action plan? An action plan is a dynamic document developed by an individual or a campus voting coalition for a campus to document efforts to institutionalize and increase nonpartisan democratic engagement in student voting. So your action plan, oh, it looks like we're not able to see my slides. Thanks for flagging. I moved them. So can you all see them now? I'm seeing heads. All right. Thank you. I shifted my DJ setup around. So thanks for letting me know that. So there you can see what the definition of an action plan is. A keyword in there, I think, is dynamic. Can change throughout a year, throughout an election cycle, and then it builds and grows on itself, election cycle after election cycle. Why should a campus develop an action plan? Well, action plans allow for campus democratic engagement work to grow and build on itself year after year, avoiding the situation of returning to square one each election cycle. So you maybe have experienced where it's August of an even numbered year and you feel like you're just trying to do the same things you did 2 years ago. This document provides an opportunity to really build on that work. We know there's a lot of staff and student turnover on campuses. So documenting and writing down what you've done, what works well, what your goals are, allows others who are new to that work to catch up to speed when there's been transitions or you've grown your voting coalition. It also can centralize the planning and implementation of your nonpartisan student voter engagement work. We've heard a lot of stories, especially on larger campuses, of different silos of work happening that the left hand isn't communicating with the right hand. It can help you bring that all together into a coalition working in a more coordinated manner, building and developing strategic capacity on campus. It also shows that a campus is committed to this work. If you don't plan, if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail, as that saying goes. So if you really, as an institution, are saying we want to increase nonpartisan student democratic engagement and student voting, but you are not developing a plan, you might not be able to achieve those goals as effectively. And I think the most important reason that I'm saving for last is that we've seen over time, campuses that develop an action plan and submit it to All In have higher campus voter turnout rates. And so this chart is showing voter turnout rates for the 2020 election. In a few months, we'll get that data for the 2022 election. But for 2020, campuses that had submitted a 2016 action plan to us had a campus voter turnout rate of 69.5% on average, 3.5 percentage points higher than all campuses that received INSOLV data. And so there's a lag effect we're seeing of when you develop an action plan that it builds over time to increasing student voter turnout rate. So we're seeing that it's not just an exercise of writing down what you're doing, but that exercise of putting together what you're doing into a cohesive plan leads to the results that we hope to see, higher student voter turnout rates. So how do you develop an action plan? Lots of different ways you can do this, some ways that have been outlined in the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, which I'll talk a lot more about in a moment, or assigning a leader. Someone needs to take charge of this, whether it's part of your job description or it's something you personally care about and you're taking on in addition to what you're doing. Assemble a team, create that voting coalition, and make sure that it's very representative of the student body and includes underrepresented individuals from underrepresented communities. Develop your timeline of when you're going to develop and write your plan. It's really important to assess the current work that's happening on campus. You may think, oh, there's really nothing going on, or you already know a lot has been going on. Take stock of what's already happening. So that's part of breaking down those silos, of bringing in those people, those programs, those initiatives that are already working towards this effort. Set goals of what you want to achieve, not only around voting rates and voter registration rates, but setting goals around increasing your voting coalition, adding voter registration to new student orientation, and rely on that INSOLV data for the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement, that data that shows what your campus voter registration and voter turnout rates are. Then start to plan the work and document it, write that action plan, submit it to All In and or the Voter Friendly Campus Initiative if you participate in either of our programs or both of them, hopefully. Implement that plan. Then you need to take time to do some evaluation. What worked well? What didn't? What progress are you making towards your goals? Re-review the plan and then repeat. And then start back at step one each cycle to make sure you're going through some of the best ways we've seen and learned of how to develop an action plan. And so I mentioned very briefly the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, the SADG. This is such a vital tool for you. And what it was created initially in 2018, we're currently working on the 4th iteration of it that'll come out this fall. But it's a document that breaks down an action plan into 9 sections. And each of those 9 sections, there's guiding questions about what information to include in an action plan. So you don't have to start with a blank Word document or maybe pen and paper if you're really old school and think, what should I put in an action plan? The Strengthening American Democracy Guide has it covered of what those sections are and what information you should consider to include. Now, it's not exhaustive. You might have ideas and information and frameworks that you want to add in there from other things. That's more than welcome. It's just a great reference for you and how to structure an action plan and what information to include in it. It also has a rubric that is based on the guide that allows you to self-assess the strength of your plan. And something I'll talk more about in just a couple of moments is for the scoring of your plan to show the strength of your action plan compared to the guide and how that can grow over time. So once you develop your action plan, as I mentioned, submit it to All In. And if you aren't participating in the All In Campus Democracy Challenge, join. It's free to join. You receive additional support around your action plan, which includes us reviewing your action plan based on that Strengthening American Democracy Guide rubric and giving you a confidential score, as well as written feedback. So you can take that feedback, implement it into your action plan, resubmit your action plan, and have it scored again. And for the 2022 action planning cycle, campuses that submitted an action plan to All In, received feedback, and then resubmitted their action plan saw their average action plan score increase by 4.4 points out of 36 possible points. So 9 action plan sections, 4 points per section, 36 possible points for your action plan. And so the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, I'll share the link in there unless, Kristen, if you have the link to the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, you can throw in there and you can do that sooner. Great. Otherwise, I'll add it towards the end. Thank you so much for those who have not seen the document before. But here are the 9 sections: executive summary, leadership. So leadership, who's your voting coalition? Who's involved? How's it broken down? What is your leadership succession plan? If your role, if you're involved in this and it changes at the institution or you leave the institution, how are you going to ensure that this work continues? What is the commitment of the campus? If you're on campus, can you see a visible commitment to student voter engagement? Is there signage around campus, especially around elections? What's the social media presence? Are there emails and messages sent from campus leaders around the importance of participating in elections? Has your campus leadership signed the All In President's commitment to full student voter participation? Lots of ways that commitment can show up, and it's really important to have that visual aspect. The landscape, that's assessing the work that you've done before. What work has already happened in the past? What worked well, what didn't? What are your demographic breakdowns on campus? Racially, age-wise, do you have more commuter students than residential students? And how do those breakdowns impact what your strategies are going to be? Goals, obviously need to have goals if you have plans. And as I mentioned earlier, really tying that into NSOLV data. If you don't have NSOLV data yet, working on setting a goal to get NSOLV data, and that all of those goals don't have to just rely on turnout rates. There's other metrics you can have of adding more required courses that have democratic engagement themes to the first year experience. Strategy, I think that's the heart of the action plan. What are the tactics and programs you're going to use? Are you celebrating civic holidays? Are you adding voter registration to new student orientation? Do you have a peer-to-peer texting program of sending reminders about elections and encouraging students to register to vote. We could spend hours talking about all the strategies and tactics that exist. But that is a key part of the action plan. But as you can see, it's just one of 9 parts of the action plan. Talked about INSOLV quite a bit already, but making sure you're breaking down what your historic INSOLV data is, in particularly if you see any gaps in participation, if you receive INSOLV data that has a breakdown of turnout based on area of study, age, race, ethnicity, sex. So you can see if there are groups that are voting at lower rates, and then make strategies and goals to increase those rates and close those participation gaps over time. Reporting, this is a section that is, how is your action plan being shared with the campus community so people know it exists? If you write a plan and it just stays on your computer, is it really a plan? So making sure it's being shared with campus leadership, being shared across the campus community so individuals know this work is happening and it is an invitation for them to come and be a part of that work. And then as we talked about and how to develop a plan, always important to write out what your evaluation is. How are you going to know that you've progressed towards your goals? What does success look like? And a key part of evaluation is looking at your INSOLV data, but for specific parts of your strategy, are certain events and programming working or not? Are students showing up and engaging? If not, that's good to know to then revamp that going forward. And so here's a little more about the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, which thank you, Kristen, for putting that in to the chat. You can see this grainy image here is the rubric. It looks much better when you have it full screen on your own computer, but it gives you a sense of there are 9 sections with 4 scoring options for each section. And each box in there will tell you generally what the action plan should contain for a leadership score for you to get 4 out of 4 points for the leadership section. And it doesn't all have to be in that specific section of the action plan. It can be, throughout the action plan. But this gives you a sense of the tool that exists to help you not only develop your action plan, but to assess how strong of an action plan you can have out of 36 possible points. And so why should you use the Strengthening American Democracy Guide? Well, our belief is when campuses use the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, they have stronger action plans. And we do see that in the action plan scores, which if you're scoring an action plan based on a guide with that same rubric, if someone's using that action plan guide more, we should see higher scores. So this is a really good trend to see. But what we see is, frankly, campuses that use that guide fully, which means we see all 9 sections present in their action plan, have a much higher action plan score than campuses that partially use the guide. So we can tell based on the sections they have in there, they've at least looked at the guide before, but not all 9 sections of the action plan are present, compared to when you see an action plan where you can tell it doesn't look like the action plan has been referenced, or the guide has been referenced or followed. So quite a stark distance. So if you really want to develop a strong action plan, even if it's the first action plan your campus has ever developed, highly recommend that you use and reference the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, because it'll help you develop a really strong action plan. And so how do we develop an action plan? Spend a lot of time talking about the Strengthening American Democracy Guide. So that's one of the best options. There are also other resources and tools and opportunities out there, and all of them tie into the Strengthening American Democracy Guide. So All In supports action planning. Campus Vote Project and the Voter Friendly Campus Initiative with NASPA supports action planning. Andrew Goodman Foundation, many others support action planning. It all comes back to the central document of the Strengthening American Democracy Guide. So if you hear different partner organizations talking about action planning, we're all talking about the same thing. Some of us have slightly different timelines and other things around it, but it's the same general principle and the same guiding document. Based on the Strengthening American Democracy Guide is Votes and Ballots, which is created by Democracy Works. It's a wonderful activity. So there's an in-person activity that is also a digital version that has a strategy board. It has tactic cards and resource cards. They've gamified the action planning process, and it has a facilitator's guide as well. So you can print out all of the materials for free, get together with your voting coalition and go through the activity to see what your landscape is like, what strategies you want to implement, and when. So it's a very hands-on activity to develop an action plan that is based on the Strengthening American Democracy Guide. They've also created the Votes and Ballots Action Planning Form. I refer to it as a fillable PDF, kind of prompts you of what information to type in or click certain boxes of what's happening. So if you don't enjoy writing, you don't have the time or capacity to write out a plan, the Votes and Ballots Action Planning Form is a great resource that can help speed up the process of developing an action plan based on the Strengthening an American Democracy Guide. Additionally, all in on our website, we have examples of really strong plans overall from 4-year institutions, 2 years, HBCUs. You can go and search on our website and find participating campuses and see any action plans they've submitted. So if you have a peer institution or a neighbor institution and you want to see what they did, or even gain ideas of what they're doing, or see where there's ways maybe you can collaborate on doing candidate forums together, since your campuses are right next to each other and in the same precinct, there's ways to create some of that cross collaboration among institutions. There are state campus voting summits. You're at one now that often include time for action planning. Today, we're talking more about action planning than doing action planning, but there'll be a time and a season to have more space for action planning to happen. And then a great opportunity to segue into that is the 2023 action planning workshops that'll be launching this fall. We piloted this with All In, Student Pergs, SLSV, Campus Vote Project, Democracy Works, some other partners came together in 2022 and said, hey, how can we put a series of action planning workshops together to not only share information and resources, but create some space for campuses to start working on their action plans. We're going to revamp it a little bit, and we'll be launching that this fall. And we plan to host these workshop sessions in fall 2023, spring of 24, and again in fall of 24. So there'll be lots of opportunities for you to plug in. For example, we haven't decided on everything yet, but for the 2023-2024 series, we'll have some more specific sections. So focusing on goal setting, focusing on strategies that you can add into your workshops. So in short, there's a number of resources, support, and tools available to develop action plans. And if you work with a partner that supports action planning, again, All In, Campus Vote Project, Andrew Goodman Foundation, others, they have staff available too that can work with you and support you in developing your action plan. Which I segued into my next slide already of who can support you in developing an action plan. Just a slew of partners who are available here that you might already be working with or that you want to start working with. And something I mentioned of the peer or neighbor institutions, connecting with them, reviewing each other's action plans. You can use the rubric and score them yourselves. And lastly, the last bullet point is reviewing action plans for All In, which allows you to gain insight from other campuses while providing them feedback. And why this is also so beneficial is then those campuses can receive feedback. When we review action plans and provide those confidential scores, we make sure that every action plan is reviewed at least twice, and we try to provide 3 reviews to that to increase the feedback, and we average that score. So we always need a lot of action plan reviewers, as we had more than 536 campuses submit an action plan in 2022. Some of those submitted an action plan multiple times. So you can quickly see we had, I think it was about 1,400 action plans that we reviewed during 2022. So you can choose, say, hey, I only want to review 3 action plans. It helps us out significantly. It helps the campuses out, and it can provide an opportunity for you to learn some more about things that you can incorporate on your campus. And what's the benefit of working with multiple partners? We can understand that that can feel overwhelming. You might think, we don't have a lot of time and capacity. I'm the only one leading this work on campus, and it's 5% of my job. How am I supposed to work with multiple partners? Those are real challenges and barriers. Understanding that, we also see significant benefits when campuses are able to work with multiple nonprofit partners, like some of the ones I've already mentioned. And you can see on that chart that as you work with more partners, we see the average action plan score increase. And in fact, when we compare that same how many partners a campus works with to what their 2020 voting rates were, the more partners that a campus worked with, the higher their voter turnout rates and voter registration rates were in 2022. Now that's a correlation. So there's a lot we could read into that. It could be these campuses already have more capacity to work with more partners. They already have more resources, which can lead to them having higher turnout rates, more time to develop a stronger action plan. But that correlation is there. And I think it's worth investigating if you think, hey, maybe I should bring on some more partners to work with. And it's not just benefiting action plan either, as some of those partners, All In doesn't have student fellows. Campus Vote Project does. If you want to get more students involved and have paid fellowships for them to help plan and lead some of this work on campus, that's a great resource to work with them in addition to working with All In. So on campus, who can help you develop this action plan? This is your campus voting coalition. And we recognize that sometimes that starts as a voting coalition of one, and that's okay. It takes time to build and grow that out. You might already have a really robust voting coalition as well. But you can see student affairs, academic affairs, faculty, have folks from the Office of the President's staff there, so you have a line to their office. So when it comes time to get their support or have them send out messages in various ways, so important to have students, that organizing principle of nothing about us without us. We can't focus on increasing student voter engagement and student democratic engagement without having students involved in the planning and implementation. And that, having just one or two students probably isn't enough. There needs to be a representation across the student body involved. Athletics departments are such a great resource. All In has the coaches voter engagement pledge that coaches can sign, and they get a toolkit of what they can do with their student athletes to make sure they're registered and engaged and ready to vote. They also can use their platforms across the campus community to share information, be at events. So if you aren't working with athletic departments, especially at some of those smaller institutions that have a high percentage of students involved in athletics, that is a great resource to tap into. And as you can see, a variety of other student groups to make sure that they're involved, as well as local election officials. Developing that partnership can bring such a mutual beneficial situation to your campus. We recognize not everyone has an environment where the local election officials or municipal officials want to work with campuses. That does exist. We see that, and that is really unfortunate. There are also a lot of examples where there's an eager desire to work together, which can help with poll worker recruitment, disseminating information, having a polling location on or near campus that works best for the community and campus community, creating internship opportunities at the local election official's office that come from students on campus, and so many more. And we've done 2 surveys of local election officials over the years, and we constantly see that local election officials that at least respond to our survey want more engagement with campuses. So bringing them in to develop your action plan as part of your campus voting coalition can provide so many benefits. So when should you develop an action plan? Well, obviously now is never too early to start planning for the next election, especially thinking of, we might think, yes, November 2024, the next big election cycle. Well, some folks will have elections this November, and some folks have elections this spring even. There's a Supreme Court election in Wisconsin coming up in a few weeks. Colorado has a series of mayoral elections, many cities do. So there's work you can be doing now, focusing on those upcoming elections, in addition to the big picture of preparing for the presidential election in 2024 and the whole primary process that will be happening starting in less than a year from now, and making sure that we increase voter engagement and awareness in those local elections and in those primary elections. If we can focus as many resources and efforts on those elections as we do as the presidential and midterm election every 2 years, we'll see such a significant increase in youth engagement and understanding of how the process works. For the all-in process, though, each election cycle, each 2-year election cycle, I should say, we have 3 submission opportunities for an action plan. This is designed partly to meet campuses where they are of when they join All In, so they have an opportunity to submit an action plan, and provide opportunities for you all to receive feedback, which I mentioned earlier, of campuses that receive feedback and resubmit their action plan saw their action plan scores increase by 4.4 points on average. So that first submission opportunity is coming up on December 15th, 2023. You don't have to have your final polished version of your action plan. If you have a draft or half of your plan written, submit that, get the feedback, incorporate that feedback, and then resubmit by May 31st. 2024. That's that second submission opportunity. And then we have the final submission opportunity on October 1st, 2024. Speaking on that May 31st, as on the slide, important notes, that coincides with the voter-friendly campus action plan deadline. So if you are in the voter-friendly campus initiative or you plan to be for the 2024 cycle, know that we've aligned those submission opportunities with them. So great opportunity, submit in December, get some feedback, resubmit in May, and you'll have an even stronger plan to submit to VFC. And note, that's the same action plan. So if you participate in All-In and VFC, submit the same action plan, it counts for both programs. In 2022, we announced All-In did a new recognition initiative called the Most Engaged Campuses for College Student Voting. And what that requires is your campus submits an action plan, submits your past Insolve data, or if you recently authorized Insolve and you've never received an Insolve report, that counts, and then have your president or chancellor sign the president's commitment. And we had nearly 400 campuses that checked all three of those boxes and were recognized. For 2024, we've changed that slightly in that a campus needs to submit an action plan by May 31st, 2024 to be eligible. We really want to incentivize campuses submitting those action plans sooner so you can get that feedback, you can incorporate it, and then once you have that plan in place, it's easier to implement it. We do receive a lot of action plans that can come in around October, November, and those campuses have missed out on an opportunity to receive valuable feedback. So keep that in mind if you want your campus to be on the 2024 Most Engaged Campuses for College Student Voting list. And 2024 is to have May 31st circled on your calendar to submit your action plan by then, if not earlier. And lastly, October 1st, for those who've participated in All-In for a while, you probably have noticed this change. We used to have Election Day be our final submission opportunity. Again, part of that desire and effort to have campuses submit action plans sooner and having campuses focus on finishing that action plan up by October 1st, so they have a whole month plus to focus on that implementation, and they're not wrapping up writing their action plan right before the election when they could be doing other work to support needs for the election. So keep that in mind. Hopefully for all of you, you won't even have to worry about October 1st because you'll submit it in December and or May. So a few more things here, and then we'll have some time for question and answers, but this is recapping of everything I just said, is just submit your action plan early and submit it often, get your feedback, update your action plan, resubmit it. Something to note on that last bullet point is in the 2022 cycle, only 21% of campuses that resubmitted an action plan. So we want to see that percentage grow. So we see that campuses that do resubmit and incorporate that feedback develop stronger plans over time. So really want to encourage more campuses to take advantage of that. Another aspect of why you should develop an action plan and use the guide to develop your action plan is recognition. And so Voter Friendly Campus has their recognition program, which is a great way to not only get support and earn that recognition. For All-In, we have the highly established action plan seal that campuses can earn. And we launched this in 2022. In the inaugural opportunity, we had 121 campuses out of 536 that submitted an action plan. So about a quarter of campuses that submitted an action plan earned the highly established action plan seal, which you can earn that by having an action plan of 31.5 points or higher out of 36 points. And so if this is a desire for you to have this action plan seal, just another incentive to submit your action plan earlier and get that feedback, because it gives you another chance to move that score up, especially showing that receiving feedback tends to increase the score of an action plan. So keep that in mind as a great way to get that recognition, to show your campus community getting recognition for the work you're doing, in addition to the recognition you can earn for your campus voting rates and voter registration rates that happens based on Insolve at the All-In award ceremony events every 2 years. So touch on a couple more resources and then we'll open it up to questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to start putting them into the chat. Raise your hands and we'll get to them. But All In has a variety of resources. We have our staff. So each campus participating in All In has one staff point of contact that you can always reach out to with questions. We have our action planning, or we have our resource toolkit. You can see the image there. We're currently refreshing it for the 2024 cycle that lists out all the information and initiatives that we have available for campuses. I've already mentioned a lot of the action plan resources and the personalized feedback. If you're interested in joining a Google group of other contacts on campuses and nonprofit partners, we have, that one's listed somewhere else. That's our higher education student voter engagement Google group, where there's a way to communicate more. We have our president's commitment to full student voter participation. If your president or chancellor hasn't signed on to that and you want to have them more engaged in this work, that can be a great way to have an introduction to them for some steps that they can take. When I talked about athletics, I touched on the Coaches Voter Engagement Pledge and Toolkit as a resource to have student athletes and coaches get more engaged in this work themselves and making sure they're registered to vote and have a plan and ways that they can support this work on campus more broadly. Allintovote.org is a free one-stop shop for voter engagement. Individuals can go on there and check their registration, register to vote, request their absentee ballot, research their ballot, find their polling location, pledge to vote, which allows them to sign up for text and email reminders as their elections near, which is included more and more local or state level elections too. So it's not just federal election reminders. Individuals who pledged to vote in Wisconsin are now getting reminders from All In about the Supreme Court election coming up in Wisconsin in April. With the allintovote.org, there are voter registration portals that are available that again are free and can be branded with your institution. So you can have Marquette University branded voter registration portal and have access to some of that data on the back end. And then we have some athletic conference voting challenges, which we have 14 of those athletic conferences. If you are in an athletic conference that currently is not participating in All In with the athletic conference, there's opportunities to bring your whole athletic conference together and have monthly meetings where you're coming together and talking with staff and students at various campuses in a community of practice set up to really learn from each other. So all to say, numerous resources just from All In of ways to support you planning, developing, and implementing your action plan, as well as the number of partners who are supporting this work to create a holistic approach to make sure you have the resources and support you need to develop and implement this work on campus. So with that, I will pause and see what questions folks have around the logistics. If you have any questions around the timeline, any of the recognition, feel free to put some questions in the chat or raise your hand and we can unmute you and see what questions you have. I see Linda, if I can get you to unmute.
Thanks. I mean, if no one else is going to ask one, I'll ask one. I just wondered, I know you guys mainly operate on campuses, but I do a lot of work with study abroad programs. Do you have a way that you count? There's like 400,000 study abroad students in any given year. And I wonder, do you have a way that they count towards their home campus that you can add into that?
When you say count to their home campus, is that in terms of
Sorry,
the
I mean,
campus?
like, you're like, if it's University of Michigan, for example, right? And someone's here from there and they do their plan and they get their thing and they want to encourage obviously as many people as possible. Do you have it? Because it's different if you're abroad. And I know that you're mainly focused on domestic voting, but I just wondered if there's a way that you count in the number of like the University of Michigan students who are in Florence, do they get counted in as well in the evaluation of this?
Yeah, and I see my colleague Stephanie. I'm going to give you a heads up and see if there's anything you want to add to this after I give an initial answer, as I know she knows more about the study abroad space than I do. But yes, that is very important to include students who are studying abroad in these efforts. And I think there is an opportunity for more resources to be created to support campuses to support those students. And whether that's messaging, making sure that the study abroad office on campus is sending information to those students so they know how can they get their ballot in time, what are the deadlines, what are the processes. There's more involved if you're trying to vote from Florence than if you're trying to vote from Dearborn, as we know, and making that part of the whole study abroad system as you're signing up to study abroad, as you're getting preparing to go, as all those checklists, making sure that voter engagement information is included. So there's multiple touch points around that. In terms of counting for voting data, whether that's exactly related to your question or not, they would still count. So if you are a student studying abroad in Florence during the 2022 election at the University of Michigan and you voted absentee, that all still would trickle back to your campus data for the Insolve reports around that. And so I'll see if Stephanie has anything that she wants to add that I might have missed. I must have covered it all. See if there's anything else, or if there's anything anyone wants to share from campus examples they have of engaging students from study abroad. Please feel free to share that as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's what I spend my whole day doing, my life. I live in the UK. So, we're happy to join in, and I can contact you later about that.
I appreciate that. And yeah, please do. Any other questions about the action planning process, or anyone want to share, their perspective who has been a part of developing an action plan and what's worked well for you? What things you've learned in the process that you've done differently?
Hey, Ryan, this is Jill. I think one of the things is really trying to get students to be part of your team and them getting the word out. They just have better access to each other. So, we try to get students we have different programs, we're school psychology, and have them be the ones, because sometimes we've actually heard from a student recently. We have our mayoral election in Chicago coming up, who said to a faculty member that voting is for those older people, not us. And so, hearing us continually promoted, is one thing, but hearing peers tell them why they should vote seems to have a greater impact. So I would say that would probably be where I would target my energy more so now.
Thanks for sharing that, Jill. Such a great point. And actually, I have a question for you if you'd like to touch on more, where you all have different campuses across a large geographic area. Even for those campuses that or institutions that have multiple campuses that are closer by, are there some things you've learned about trying to coordinate your efforts across multiple campuses?
It's difficult. It's finding the right person who will really lead the charge on each of those campuses, that'll respond to your emails and things like that. One thing that's worked is whenever I send out an email to our students, I CC all the people from the other campuses. So whether they want to copy that email and use it to send out, or just as a reminder to send it out, that's really helped keep everyone moving forward together as a group versus just one campus pushing it.
Thank you for sharing that. The reality of coordinating across multiple campuses is a challenge. And hopefully the process of developing an action plan over time brings more people into the fold and creates those lines of communication and collaboration to build on future elections. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I think we can wrap this up and give folks some time. And I think the big takeaways are, hopefully you take away from this is, if you're on a campus, develop your action plan, submit it by December 15th, 2023 to receive that feedback, incorporate that feedback, and resubmit that action plan. and that the importance of developing an action plan allows you to build on your work. And we see that campuses that develop action plans have higher campus voting rates. So it's not just an effort of putting words on paper. There is true impact from doing this work. So I appreciate
Ryan,
you.
can I
Oh, go ahead,
pop in
Kristen.
for a sec?
Please
Hey,
do.
guys. Ryan and I work together in Wisconsin. I'm with the Campus Vote Project, and obviously he's with All In. If you are in a state that has a Campus Vote Project staff member, there are 10 of us, 10 states across the country, that several of them in the Midwest that have them. We will happily help you do your action plan. Even if you say you're going to submit it to All In, I'll still help you do it. And then I'll encourage you to also submit it to the Voter Friendly Campus, because it's the same thing, same plan. But please, when he says, we'll help you, we're all really serious. Don't feel like you're doing this on your own. I will walk you through it. I will come to your campus and meet with you. We'll do anything we can to help you create the greatest action plan ever.
Thank you for adding that. And Kristen has helped on scores of action plans and has reviewed scores of action plans. So if there's anyone who knows action plans, it's Kristen and the CVP staff as a whole. So please go to them. They are such a great resource. Well, with that, thank you for coming to this session. Thank you for being at this summit and the work that you were a part of and that you're doing. And we'll hope to see you again in the future, and feel free to reach out and have a wonderful Friday. And I hope you have a nice spring weekend ahead.